FinTechTalk, the live webinar with no presentations, no PowerPoint, just talk.
Hello and welcome to FinTech Talk. I'm your host, Charles Orton-Jones. We received a lot of requests recently to delve into financial crime. There's a feeling that a lot of organizations are not up to speed. They're really struggling with anti-money laundering, with fraud, with upgrading their systems. And there was a request for us to go out and find perhaps a few of the world's leading experts to share what you really ought to be doing in your organization. So we have scoured the world, found the 4 experts, and brought them here together today for you. So without further ado, let me introduce our panel. We have Anastasia Savateva, who is Deputy Head of Financial Crime Compliance, Continental Europe at Fidelity International. Now, she absolutely is an expert. Hi, thank you for joining us, Anastasia. Anastasia, I can mention, recently won the prestigious Rising Star in Compliance Award from Compliance Week. She's also a 2-time finalist in their Excellence in Compliance category, so we really couldn't hope for anyone better. We have, from Portugal, João Caeiro, and I hope I've done your name justice, João. He is head of anti-money laundering and, thank you so much, and combating financial terrorism, financing of terrorism at Banco BPI, which some of us may know as Portuguese Investment Bank. He works the traditional rather than fintech side, but he again has just an eagle-eye view of the different areas in which his organization operates. So, João, lovely to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Charles. Pleasure to be here with you.
Cool. And from Denmark, we have Linus Fugel, who is Senior Vice President, Financial Crime Risk and Prevention at Danske Bank. So one of the leading banks in Scandinavia. Linus, great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
And finally, we have Matt Neal, who is the co-founder and partner at Beyond, which is one of the world's leading organizations in transformation programs at financial organizations. Matt will take your bank through the steps necessary for major upgrade programs and works with some of the world's leading banks. And let's delve in. And there's just a jumping off point I thought was really relevant, which is a news article from the Straits Times in Singapore reporting that the authorities in Singapore have seized $2.6 billion worth of assets. Now, this is down to lax procedures on the part of banks operating in Singapore. And it's just a reminder, really, that even in the best invigilated jurisdictions, there's reams of paperwork that banks fill out. But the truth is, many organizations are just not up to scratch. There's a problem here. Now, Anastasia, just sum it up for us. I mean, we always assume that with the endless regulation that goes on with anti-money laundering, anti-fraud, that banks must be up to scratch, but it just doesn't seem right. Perhaps you could just give us an overview about the industry. I mean, how much work have organizations got to do?
Well, you know, it really depends. Honestly, that's been some time that I left the banking sector for the funds industry, so it's a bit different from the banking industry. But what I have seen is that primarily there is a lack of understanding of what is a regulatory expectation, actually, because there's a lot of regulations, as you said, Charles, and there is you know, this mass of documents published on the regulatory websites and, you know, some guidance by, I don't know, compliance associations or working groups or whatever. And I think that the main reason why everything is kind of lagging behind or is not really up to the standard is that there is a huge lack of understanding of what exactly this expectation is, and not only like with regards to the overall compliance program, how it should be structured, but also in terms of very specific points, for example, transaction monitoring, which is very different, for example, from the banking sector, where you have direct transactions with the client, and the funds industry, where you don't have this kind of a direct relationship with the final client, or very, very rarely. So I do really think that this is the main reason. Now, afterwards, we also have this reason of around budgets. So this is something we just, it's something we can't really change at a compliance officer level. We can just, push for some change, but the final decision doesn't belong to us. And I think that's one of the challenges here.
Fantastic. Linus, Danske Bank. I mean, just give us an overview of what you hear from, peers in the industry. What are the big challenges of getting up to speed with combating financial crime?
Yes, thank you. I think we're seeing a number of factors impacting this. So I would be cautious in pointing to one particular point, but I think one of the challenges is that maybe we as a society have taken some time to get up to speed. I think that has happened now. So I think the regulatory space has really, you could say, accelerated, which I think is good for us as a bank. That has helped us a lot as well in terms of getting up to speed. Then I think also our bank particularly, we come from more than 150 years of history, and I think we are now a product of that history, and the requirements that we're seeing, they also make us kind of change many things within the bank. So that goes both from actually having sufficient data quality, it goes into having sufficient processes, but it also goes into actually having the culture around this, understanding that fighting financial crime, it's part of everything we do. I think we as a bank, we've come a long way. We're not quite at the goal line, but we are very close, and as such, it's an exciting journey to be part of.
Cool. You mentioned how useful the regulator was. Now, a lot of people think of the regulators as a massive pain, but I suppose that's doing them an injustice. They're not there to merely enforce minimum standards. They're there to try and foster a culture of people doing the right thing. What's your relationship like with the regulator? Do you find the rules helpful, or do you just always go further than the regulations require?
Yeah, so I think it's natural that when you as a financial institution see new regulation coming out, I think it is often seen as a challenge because we need to change the way we work within the bank. But I think when you get over that initial shock, I actually think that it is a very positive thing because it gives us clear guidance on what is it that society expects. And also then, we don't have to guess ourselves. Instead, we can actually look at the regulation, and then we can make sure that our processes, that our systems on the inside are living up to society. And I think when we look at financial crime, when we look at money laundering, I mean, we can be perfect in our bank. I'm not saying that we are, but theoretically we could be perfect, and still society could have a huge problem in this space. And I think if we really want to get to the bottom of this, we need this collaboration, and it's between regulators and financial institutions, but it's also between the industry, so within the industry. And I think that is what's required if we really want to solve the problem and not just push it around, which I think no one really wants.
Fantastic. João, just give us the view from Portugal. How do you see a relationship with the regulator?
Well, to be fully honest, I think that we are moving at different speeds when it comes to the EU. So, and I've worked at the British Bank, and I know that the FCA is more it communicates more with the banks in the UK than, for example, the regulator here in Portugal. So, and let me just add something that I fully agree with what Anastasia said, and obviously also connects with the question that you are posing. Is I think that obviously there's a gap between the understanding of the regulation coming out, and that's quite important. But I would say that the expectation of the different stakeholders in this process is also a key part in combating financial crime, because legislators, they have an expectation, regulators, they have an expectations, banks, they have an expectation, clients, they have expectations, and the general public, they have expectations. And most of the times, these expectations are totally different between all these stakeholders. And it's quite difficult to balance them and find common ground. And there's one of the major keys that we are talking nowadays is the level playing field. I think we are all talking about the same, but we are not doing enough to reach the level playing field. And even though we're talking about the UK, they come out of the EU, but they are still a major partner of the EU. We have to be fully aligned with them when it comes to combating financial crime. So,
yeah. Just try to interrupt. What do you mean by different expectations? The public, the regulator, the financial industry have different expectations. What does that mean?
I think that the legislators, when in talking about the EU, when they propose new AML directives, they intend to, I would say, tackle financial crime, but also they intend to somehow please the general public, that they are doing things that will somehow put the banks in their places and will somehow force the banks to act, because the banks are in somehow guilty of being part of financial crime. And so there's an expectation that they will come out on the good side and point the finger somehow to the financial sector. The regulators, they will always try to be the good guys, doing tough regulation, doing tough inspections on the banks. And obviously the clients, what they do is they are tired of paying higher fees every year the fees are going up. But what they forget is that whenever there's a new regulation coming out, that costs money, and that needs to be paid by someone. So we are not talking between each other, so we are not leveling the expectations to reach common ground in order for us, because we all want the same at the end of the day. But we are
fantastic.
Not going through the same path.
Thanks so much. One reason that these projects stall a little is just they're so complicated. And I wonder, Matt, at Beyond, whether you could just talk to us about some of the work that you do and add a note of realism maybe, because some of these upgrade programs are extremely complicated. And there's a reason that people are further back than where they should be. And it's because they don't have the manpower, they don't have the expertise. There's a natural inbuilt conservatism. Introducing new measures it's just really hard, isn't it? Just tell me about the kind of work that Beyond does in helping banks overcome this natural conservatism.
Yeah, I think that's right. So good afternoon, everyone. But so I think we tend to get involved with organisations when either something's gone wrong and the regulator has found some issues where the banks have to, or banks or asset managers have to fix something, or the organisation has maybe got through that remedial side of things and then is looking at what they need to do from a strategic point of view to move things forward. But I think because of where so many organisations have been, there has been it's very difficult to remediate things as well as build for the future at the same time. So there is always this conflict of trying to get through the cycles of remediation to get to a baseline where you can actually sort of a solid base where you can then move forward and improve things in your own organization. And of course, the guys have mentioned budget as a challenge, but this is a very complex area, and where you have, I think, one of the main differences between financial crime programs to a sort of normal operational program is that they fundamentally need some different things to happen, and they have a different level of scrutiny on them. If I think there's some fact out there around 70% of change programs fail, but when you're going through a remediation or you're going through a change where has a very high profile regulatory requirement, and you're going to get asked about that by the regulator, these programs can't really afford to fail. So they're under a sort of a different level of scrutiny to really succeed. And I think fundamentally what we need to think about when we think about these types of programs is that they are, especially the ones under the regulators' kind of scrutiny, is that there are a different requirement needed in terms of how you manage and execute those programs compared to your normal change programs as well. And I think if organizations can kind of start to adapt how they actually approach those types of programs and those remedial programs, and under the ones where they've got that regulatory scrutiny, they can be much more effective and successful in how they go about their change, because it's, as I said, it's kind of zero fail. They can't really fail in some of these programs.
Okay, well, perhaps we could talk about the ways in which organizations can improve. I mean, Anastasia, for example, training people, that's something that is required. But I know from our sort of brief conversation before we went live, you were talking about there are many different approaches to training, and there's a huge disagreement in the industry. Perhaps you could just tell us what you mean by this. Why is there a different approach to training people when it comes to financial crime?
Well, let's say that training is not exactly the part that people enjoy receiving and enjoy giving. You know, it's something that is, from my opinion, it's something that is some kind of a talent. So usually what happens is that there's a huge lack of time, a huge lack of resources. So people focus on giving something like computer-based training of 1 hour where, you know, you can click through the thing and then just go straight to the assessment and maybe potentially pass it from the first attempt. But what I have experienced is that, for example, shorter sessions in person just focus on some kind of specific topic like beneficial ownership or exactly sanctions or exactly how sanctions are dealt with, for example, in Luxembourg. This has far more impact than just, you know, trying to apply some kind of a blanket approach to everyone. And I can conceive that it's not available to everyone, this kind of you know, possibility to give this kind of training. But I think if we really want to bring everyone at the same level of knowledge and the same level of understanding what is required from us by the regulator, but also by other stakeholders, including the board, including shareholders as well, because shareholders as well, they focus on ethical things, and financial crime is a subdivision of ethics. So if we don't, you know, if we don't promote this kind of culture, then, you know, we're getting everything wrong.
So just give us some tips. I mean, how do you make sure people are taking the right sort of qualifications and studying the right things? Do you have, I don't know, a minimum number of hours a week that people have to study? Do you have like a mini university that devotes itself to educating people? What practical tips can you pass on?
Absolutely. I think establishing some kind of academy, which is, you know, very, very frequently used as a term in companies. Academy that allows people to do the training as they want, not exactly, you know, on a predefined schedule or, you know, absolutely forcing them to take a training or an assessment. Just allowing people to self-evaluate what would they need for their job, or for example, my team can give some kind of advice on where we see some lack of understanding while working with another team on certain topics. We can give this kind of advice just to push people to take some training in this specific topic. And, you know, we always encourage not just computer-based training, but courses with, you know, with living people, if I may say. So this is what is really working for us.
Yeah, that's right, because I mean, there's no question some of the online stuff is just you know, tick box nonsense.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Linus, give us some tips on how to improve things. I mean, there's how to train people, how do we avoid tick box nonsense, but also, you know, what do you think has really worked for Danske Bank? If you can pass on any advice to people watching this, what have you learned from your organization and from your other peers in the industry that really makes them?
Yeah. So our bank has been on a journey now for close to 5 years, and I think that in itself says quite a lot, that this is not something which is fixed overnight. Kind of now being able to look back, and I wouldn't say we're at the end of the journey, but we're getting very close to, I would say, removing this gap, which I think I can fairly say that we have been in. But one of the things that has really worked is actually changing our way of transforming. We have done this by breaking down silos. So we used to be, quite split into different silos. So you would have, for example, you'd have the specialist within, money laundering or sanctions and so forth. We would have the, people coming from business side, and you would have people coming from the tech side. And I think one of the things that we have really seen work is to actually secure putting our people in the same room, and really put them in the same room. And I think from that kind of thinking, and also allowing people to have the mandate, I think that has actually proven really valuable for us. So there are a number of challenges, and they they come up from day one basically. But when people are in the same room, and even though when you have big discussions and that you still have to meet up the next morning and sit still in the same room with these people, actually things start to move. And you don't have to wait in 2 weeks to book a meeting. You don't have to wait till someone is available, because every day you have this cross-functional team together in a room. And I think we have seen some really good results from that. And I will say, even though in my organization we are delivering solutions, so often centered around, for example, a fraud prevention solution based on machine learning, then it's clear that the technology in itself is not such a big issue. It's all the stuff surrounding the solution. So, what's our risk appetite? What are our requirements? And, what's our long-term strategy? All of these things around. And I think that is what makes it really complex. But by having people together, giving them the mandate, we have actually seen real progress. And then when you're able to deploy these things, people also get this sense of accomplishment, which then for the next thing you put to see, there's a completely different energy in the room available to.
So give us some practical tips. I mean, how many days are we talking? Because you're right, most people block out a couple of hours. A lot of people rely on Zoom or Teams or some garbage like that, and it's boring and people zone out. Drives everyone absolutely crazy. So I remember Jack Welch, when he ran GE, used to say, no, 2 days, everyone cancels their diaries, everyone gets together at some offsite location and brainstorms an issue. That is completely out of fashion these days, but it sounds like it's sort of coming back into fashion at Danske Bank.
Yeah.
So practically, who's in the room? And you talk about mandate as well. Who's in the room? How many days do you take?
So, well, I mean, and of course, with the whole COVID-19, I mean, we had then a period in the middle where suddenly we were not able to sit physically together, but it happened virtually. But essentially, you would have, many hours per day with the same people, the same team sitting in the same room, and that would be every day. And now we are post in COVID-19. It's these squads. They're headed by a product owner, and basically it's the same group of people, 8, 10, 12 people working together every day, and they are sitting together. Of course, there can be exceptions, but these are really exceptions. So starting point is you sit together with these people, and they are, coming from different backgrounds, Monday to Friday. That's the starting point.
Nice. I love really, really practical. Thank you so much. João, same question to you, really. What masterclass tips can you pass on to our viewers about how to make this really work well?
Yeah. So thank you for the question. It's a very important one. So like Anastasia and Linus said, so I would say that we have to apply a mixed approach. So obviously, and there's a formality that needs to be complied with. We need to ensure that all of our staff have they do the financial crime training, and we have a e-learning, which for sure is boring for them, even though it's a mandatory training, they will do it, but we are aware that this is not enough in order for them to fully understand the risks that they are living, that they are facing each day. So a compliance academy is obviously something that we have here also. We put we put videos for people to just not to read an article or something like that. We have made videos, for example, relating to the war in Ukraine and the sanctions on Russia. We also we have a KYC remediation that is ongoing. I don't know which bank doesn't have any KYC remediation ongoing. I think everyone has some kind of remediation ongoing. And something that we are doing is there's people in the compliance team that they go to the business branches, and I would say that we are going to visit around 80% of our business branches, and they are going to go there and they are going to take the moment to explain why we are doing this remediation, what is necessary, and we are going to take a look at examples in each branch in order to clarify any doubts and to make them aware that, listen, compliance, we are not the bad guys. We are here to help you. We are here to help you doing good business. And we are here at the end of the day to protect you and the bank. So I would say that, just to wrap it up, we need to do several things at the same time in order to take the most of people's time to make them interested in.
I'd just like to pick you up on that, because I just like this idea that boredom is a major issue here, that almost inattention. Do you think there is a problem here that compliance is seen as overly box ticking, and it tends to just create work for people who are completely innocent, whereas the major criminals tend to benefit from people's inattention, almost kind of over-regulation, over-compliance leads to there being a blind spot. I mean, we know with the war in Ukraine that there are Russian officials. The deputy of the Duma was found to have some $15 million apartment in Spain, clearly bought with corrupt money. He doesn't earn that sort of money. Or Lavrov's stepdaughter buying a $4 million apartment in London cash at 21. They don't seem to be interfered. So just tell us about the reputation compliance has.
So compliance has a very, let's say, difficult reputation, because usually we don't provide any good news. So we just appear whenever something is going wrong, or whenever we have to say no to an operation, to a new account, to a new client. And that's the way that we are seen. In talking about the internal clients, compliance does not sit last when it comes to satisfaction of internal clients, but almost last. We are second place from the bottom. But curiously, when we have internal vacancies, there's a lot of people applying. So people do like compliance, they do find it interesting, but we just somehow they think that we make their job difficult. Even I understand that, because they are mainly business is very pressure. They go under lots of pressure to reach the numbers that they need to reach, and they think that many of the times we are the wall that is between their goal and their prize at the end of the semester, the year, or whatever. But one thing that I've learned is that we are in the business of long-time relations. If we do a bad sale now, it will haunt you in the near future. If it not in 1 year's time, in 2 years' time. I just remember that my supervisor asked me for a client that information, and we answered them. After 3 years, they think that we did not do the correct thing regarding the client itself. The only thing is that we exited the client 2 years ago, and they forgot to ask about it.
Perhaps I could return back to you, Anastasia. I'm interested in what you think people get wrong, Anastasia, when it comes to these sorts of programs. I mean, people shy away from this question, but no, we need to know the awful truth.
What people get wrong is, I think they kind of try to overcomplicate things. Say, just imagining that, the more we do and the more complicated we make our systems and processes, and, the more pages we have in our procedure or policy, the better, and we have some kind of meat to show to the regulator. But that's not it. I think the people are really missing the whole purpose of financial crime compliance, which is not to overcomplicate things and just complete the reviews or create some kind of 1,000 pages manual of procedures. It's really the primary intention, of financial crime compliance is to really do business ethically, and it doesn't really. Well, it's not that it doesn't really matter how you do this, how you ensure the ethical side of things, but because there is this lack of guidance from the regulator very often, there is this lack of understanding and this trend to overcomplicate things and do more than what is really expected or required.
Okay, that's great. We've got Matt back. Now, Matt, I'm really pleased to be able to talk to you because banks plainly find implementing big change schemes extremely difficult. A lot of them fail. And clearly, many of them call on your organization Beyond to talk them through it, to help them. There's the software side, there's the people side, there's a process side. So I'm wondering, what is it that you do that banks can't do themselves? Perhaps you could just share some of the magic. What goes on? What's your formula?
Well, I think it's it's a little bit of that people at banks have their day jobs as well, and then maybe they might have to change teams. But I think when transformations happen, it is above and beyond kind of the normal realm of change as well. So I think what externals can bring is experience of doing this at multiple organizations and in multiple kind of the same situations, and horsepower and experience of doing the specific stuff before, right? So it's a very sort of bringing in the sort of the hit squad to kind of take a specific to take on a specific challenge. I think I think it's very important you sort of banks partner with the right people. I think it's always about collaboration, about working together. So I think not meaning to sort of call out people in a bad way, but EY had to provide a refund to Santander because of how they had helped or not helped Santander recently. And I think it's very much there. You can't outsource the problem, but working with external parties in a sort of very collaborative way is really, really critical to this. And I think it's that experience and skill set and horsepower that externals can bring. And if you do that in the right way with your own teams, where we are bringing that experience, but the teams within the bank can continue to own and effectively we upskill them as we go through the process, then they're left in a better place as well. Ultimately, the regulator is going to look at the systems, the processes, but also the culture that exists within those organizations, and is that organization adhering to the regulations once the consultancy is left, for sure, right? So it's ultimately on them. So to do our job well, we need to leave the banks in a better place from that sort of holistic perspective. And we obviously, I think what we're very, very good at is bringing that experience and how do you actually manage these programs. I think Linus talked about, this is a journey, but it can't be a never-ending journey. So you need to sort of can't wrap up every challenge in these sort of change programs. So it's about sort of managing that scope really, really clearly, about sort of, making sure that your program control and reporting and communication is really, really clear. There's so many best practice things that go into running these journeys, as Linus put it, really well. So you can get to the point where Danske are at now, where you're starting to see that you're coming to the end of that sort of that first phase of that, really, where you can sort of draw a line in the sand and say we're sort of meeting our obligations. And I'm sure that they will continue to evolve their program over the coming years and get more sophisticated and but you got to kind of get to base camp. If sort of the analogy of you can't sort of try and aim for the top of Everest.
I'm interested about just how organizations know they're kind of at the right place, because banks famously can be quite insular. And I'm thinking of some of the pickle many of them got into, I don't know, with their software systems, some of them running core banking platforms that were obsolete about 20 years ago. they didn't really know, because one bank does one thing, another bank does another thing. They've all got their own esoteric ways of operating, and they can end up doing some quite bizarre things without realizing it. But you just emphasize this idea of working with maybe an organization like yours that is able to bring lessons from multiple clients and say to someone who you're working with afresh, oh my God, you're miles out of date. Here's what other people are doing.
Well, of course you do. And I think people move around as well from organization to organization. So they will also bring that as well. So I think in general, it's that combination of, us being able to provide that view, and vendors from across the market will, technology providers can help with that as well. But although they are selling their tool, but consultancies can definitely do that. But, all of the people around this virtual table, will have worked at other organizations where they have seen what worked well, and they will all obviously be comparing and benchmarking their own organizations against that once they arrive. But I think it's super critical to just go back to one of the points you made of, well, how do you know when, whether you're at a good place? I think certainly there's a conversation with the regulator of this is what we're trying to do, especially when you've got a sort of failing that you're trying to address, and being very clear on this is what we're trying to do, and this is how we're going to get there. And these are sort of, there's a real sort of art in telling the regulator about what you're going to do and how you're going to do it and why you're doing it, and then making sure you kind of deliver to that as well. So there's also, there is a back and forth that's possible with the regulator, which shouldn't be ignored as well.
Fantastic. João, in Portugal, how do you know if you're doing a good job, and what metrics do you use to determine whether you're succeeding?
Well, that's a very difficult question to answer, because that would suppose that we have a supervisor or regulator that provides a lot of guidance, and they do awareness sessions with the banks, which is not the case. So what we do is, obviously, we do make assessments on the regulation and what we have to do, and we do build our own dashboards and our own KPIs, and we do discuss them with the third line of defense, in this case, the internal audit. And also we have, in our case, we have an external audit on financial crime. So they do a yearly assessment on the controls that provides us with an important feedback where we are. So because obviously they do audits to other banks, and that is one major moment to understand if we are if we do meet the regulators' expectations or not. So basically, we have to involve several stakeholders to fully understand where we are at the end of the day. Because if we are just expecting to some feedback from the regulator, we don't have that. Obviously, we do have inspections from them, but they do come around every 2 or 3 years. And obviously, if an inspection comes in, that they will write findings, because there's something always that's missing, and we will work on that. But in our day-to-day, what we try to do is to discuss with the business, which is the first line of defense, discuss with audit, both internal audit and also the external audit, to try and figure it out where we are at the moment.
Okay, my final question really is just about the relationship you guys have with the regulator, because one view is you kind of shudder when the phone rings, oh God, it's the regulator. Another view is you can actually build up quite a warm relationship with them and maintain conversations and talk to their technical experts and use them as like an unofficial consultancy. I mean, Anastasia, how close is your relationship with your regulator?
Well, in Luxembourg, the regulator is quite active, and honestly, they do like when financial institutions act on a proactive way, sharing experiences or asking questions. So I would say that in general, the relationship of financial institutions in Luxembourg is very close with the regulator, also through different professional associations as well. So the regulators giving very frequently presentations and sharing their expectations during quite, I'd say, informal exchanges. So I would say that the relationship is far closer than, for example, in France, where maybe just because France is bigger than Luxembourg, I mean, in terms of population and territory, maybe because of that, there is not so much proximity with the regulator, but in Luxembourg there is.
Interesting. Linus, what happens in Denmark? We tend to have a vision of Danes as highly collaborative. So a terrible cliche, but what's the relationship like with the regulator?
Yeah, so I think it's important to understand here that we cannot control what criminals do, and that basically impacts, a lot of different things. And I think, the regulator, they also understand that, we're actually up against, the same enemy, if I can put it like that. And based on that, so I think the collaboration is based, if we can show that we have a strong foundation, a strong governance in place, that we have taken an active decision on this is the appetite we're working within, then it's also my experience, my impression that regulators, they're actually, they're also seeing that. And I think we have a good and constructive relationship. And there's no doubt that they are a regulator and we are the regulated part. That's no doubt about that. But that being said, I often experience that you can actually have a very constructive dialogue. And I think many of the inputs that we are getting, also something that we can take back and then also be reassured that we're actually living up to expectations. And I think for me, it also helps like saying it's not just a regulatory body, it's actually the society that's surrounding us. So I think if we are good in building that relation, and I think it was even mentioned earlier also, this is a long-term relation. I think if we're good in building that, then I also think we have a good outset for also fighting crime in the future in this space.
Gosh, very positive. And João, in Portugal, do you have any tips for organizations watching this on how to improve their relationship with a regulator?
Well, we need to be proactive. We need to approach them. The Portuguese regulator is very formal, so they prefer to receive emails, but I think that in some way we have to try and break these barriers, and we need to approach them, be proactive, reach out to them and present the problems that we have currently. And I think we also have to take the chance whenever, for example, there's an assessment from FATF to the country, that's a good opportunity to reach out to the regulator and remind them that they should promote public-private partnerships, because that's one of the measures from ATF in how they assess the risk of financial crime in a country. And if they are not doing enough, that's a good moment to remind them that they should be more present, they should be more cooperative, and obviously they will not forget their role as a regulator and as a supervisor, and they will sanction who needs to be sanctioned. But it's very important nowadays, because if we don't reach out to them and if we don't push them to the game, it will be very, very difficult to combat the money launderers, because they move faster than us.
Yeah, fantastic. And Matt, if I give the final word to you, I'd just like you to reflect on the overall picture here, because we've heard that compliance is expensive. It's some people regard it as an imposition on their jobs. But let's just finally remind ourselves what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with sanctions with organizations, like Putin and his allies. We're dealing with drug cartels. We're dealing with major criminals who are doing great harm in the world. So perhaps, Matt, you could just ask us to reflect slightly on, what the big picture is here when it comes to financial crime.
I think the big picture here is that financial crime teams, compliance teams are dealing with a very, very sort of fluid environment, a very fast-moving environment, a constantly changing environment. So if you think about a global organization working in lots of different countries with maybe clients in multiple different countries as well, there is a lot of moving parts there. There is customers and changes to maybe company structures that are going on in the background and who's behind those companies. There is the regulatory side. There are laws changing. There are their own internal organizations moving around as well. with people leaving and organizational changes, and maybe they're purchasing, acquiring a new organization to bring in as well, or so whatever those changes might be. But it's a very complex environment. There's a huge amount of information out there in terms of data and other things. So simply to sort of manage all of this information, all of these changes, and again, we said under the regulator's eye, which is what one of the sort of in the title of the webinar, it's a high pressure environment, and it's difficult to kind of do everything at once. You don't have unlimited budgets, you don't have unlimited people to do all this stuff. So I think everyone who operates in this space is doing their utmost and their best to kind of work effectively, but sometimes there is just that much to do that it sometimes there have been failings obviously in the past. So I think it's an industry which is continuing to evolve, and I'm sure we'll see huge strides over the next few years, and not least as I'm sure the regulatory environment continues to change and evolve as well. So
for sure. Thank you so much for that. Guys, we draw to a conclusion. Thank you so much. I've learned a tremendous amount. Make friends with the regulator, get people into a room, make the training a bit more interesting. Don't rely on tick box exercises, and also collaborate with your peers. There's so much intelligent stuff out there. Organizations going it alone, well, they're completely crazy. There are so many other people to learn from. So Matt, João, Linus, Anastasia, thank you so much for your help. And we'll be back 2 weeks' time, 24th of October, usual time, 4 p.m. UK time, FinTech Talk. So I hope to see you then. But for today, thank you very much.